So there's probably two reasons why you're watching this video. Either you're stuck on freeCodeCamp's designing a business card, or you really like hearing my voice. So if you're new to this channel, my name's Rob. I'm with freeCodeCamp. I'm a coding instructor where I try to help break things down in my videos, and I'm utilizing freeCodeCamp's laboratories or workshops that they give you, and I go through them as well in this video, so that way you can get the right answer, but also you can learn a few things because I'm coming at it from an instructor point of view. So if that's something that excites you, let's go ahead and get going with the video. And something that you can really do that helps us out, make sure that you give this video a thumbs up. It's something free, it doesn't cost anything, but it really helps that YouTube algorithm out. So let's go ahead and dive into what we're going to be doing with designing a business card with freeCodeCamp. So I'm excited about this one because I have been in the past recording videos on just HTML, and it looks really ugly when we do things with HTML. And this one, we're going to be utilizing CSS. And it says we're going to be building an app that will look very similar to this. And it's got a picture, it's got your name, software, and then it almost looks very similar to a linked tree. But it's a little business card that we're going to be making in here. I will tell you that the user stories, we only have, looks like 16. And the test, when you scroll through it, it's almost more than double, right? And a lot of these things that we see on here, although we have all these user stories to go through, we're just going to go and focus on the user stories. And usually maybe a single user story or a single element may have 3 tests that are associated with it, which is why you see more tests than you do user stories. With that being said, let's go ahead and dive right into this. We're going to go user story by user story, and down below this video, it will be chaptered out. So if you are stuck on a certain user story, you can go ahead and jump to it if that's what you want to do. But we're going to go through this, and I'm going to teach a few things as we go along, and maybe some skills on looking things up if we don't know where to find the answer. So that's all part of the develop is, yes, there's a problem, we're going to solve it, and how do I look it up? That's going to be some of the key to this video. Let's go ahead and start this off with the user story number 1. It says that you should have a link going to the styles CSS using a link in the head section of the file. This one is one that you might not really know off the top of your head. I know a lot of IDEs like Visual Studio Code, they do these things for you automatically with just a few keystrokes. So it's always hard to remember what can go in there. And so we don't have access to VS Code, but we do have access to the internet. And this is what I would suggest looking into Google, which is, hey, I'm trying to linking a CSS page to an HTML document. And usually you'll throw in the words like W3 Schools is a really good resource to put in there. And then you'll come to something that looks like this, right? And this is a little how-to. And this is the one that we're going to need. It says that inside the head section, we can go ahead and place this. We give the relevance or the relationship here to be a style sheet, and then we want the href to reference the actual style.css. So we do have to modify a few things on here, but we can copy this to our clipboard, and then we can bring it back over to our code. And again, we're not going to see anything with this. And how are we going to modify this to make it fit our scenario? If you notice up here that we have instructions, we have index.html, which we're currently on, and then we have the style CSS. So we need to reference the style CSS or styles and make sure that we put an S on there. And that should complete that test. Now, until we get to the user story number 2, or I guess you can test it out down below by trying the test to see if you pass that first part. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next user story, and we can definitely tell whether or not this link is actually linked, because in the real world, you're not going to have these unit tests out there, but how are you going to test yourself and knowing that you linked it properly? So let's move on to the next user story. We're in user story number 2. It says your page background should be rosy brown, and then the overall font should be either Arial, and then you want to have a fallback of sans serif. How do we make this happen? This is going to be our test whether or not we have our link proper. So in the styles CSS, I'm going to come over here. Notice that I have a new panel over here. It may get in the way. We'll see how the layout goes throughout this video, but for right now, I'm going to keep the widths of each one of these things like you see them. Now, what do we need to attach to? How are we going to put that style on there? And the thing that we need to realize, or what you're always going to start off with, is what element does the HTML page have on it that we actually visually get to see? And that's going to be in the body. So I'm going to target the body, just typing out the word body. And there's different ways to apply CSS. Throughout this, we're going to use elements, we're going to use IDs, we're going to use classes, I'm assuming, and we're going to target them that way. But there's no period, there's no hashtag on the body. And one of the things that, students as well as myself will tend to forget, that each time we type something out, we want to make sure that we're ending it with a semicolon. Semicolons matter so much. They're like putting a period at the end of a sentence. And if you skip one, then it's like the code breaks from there forward or there down, and things aren't just going to work. So please make sure you remember the semicolons. Now, the background color. We are going to choose the key word here, the property here, background color, and then that does have a hyphen on there. So there's my property or my attribute, and then I want to go ahead and apply the value that goes on here. And then there's going to be colors that you can type in there, like red, salmon, pink, lime. Like all those have values associated with them, and there's no different than a rosy brown. And then we want to put the semicolon on there. It looks like I may have to shrink one of these up here just to see how things go. So that is the background color. You notice that it changed pink here for me, or the rosy brown color. And that's an indication that, hey, our link actually works, because if it didn't, we would just get a white page. So we now know that our link did work properly in the head section. And that's what I was trying to explain to you earlier, which is, hey, we're not going to have these unit tests when we're out there developing. How are we going to see and test things out? Next thing on here is the text font. It needs to be Arial with a fallback of sans serif. And so this is going to be utilizing the property of font family. So that's going to be font family. And then we want to set this to Arial. And then we're going to put a comma in there to signify that, hey, if you don't have Arial on your computer, then we're going to back it up with a sans serif. And then don't forget that semicolon. And that should satisfy user story number 2 here for us. We're not going to visually see anything besides the color, and we won't see this font family function properly until we actually have a text, something with text on it, like a paragraph tag. Moving on to the next. All right, user story number 3. It looks like we're setting up some CSS properties on this. We're not going to visually see anything quite yet, but it says all paragraph elements need to have a top and bottom margin of 5 pixels. And let's go ahead and do the following. We're going to do the paragraph tag, and then we're going to do the margin. We'll do a top of 5 pixels, and then we'll do a margin bottom of 5 pixels. Now, the reason that I'm going with this approach rather than just an all-inclusive one, it didn't give us any details whatsoever for what did it want for the left and right. And I didn't want to destroy the natural values that a paragraph element does give you. And maybe we change it later on. I don't know. Haven't read through all of these use cases, but that would be solving problem number 3. User story number 4. It says, by default, all links on the page should not be underlined. And then when you hover over them, they should be underlined. So let's go ahead and apply that type of logic. So there are some default things that we have with certain elements, and if you need to modify them, you definitely can utilizing CSS. That's the beauty of it. And what we are talking about and what we have to think about is, what are the elements that they're talking about here, and how do we attack those in CSS? And so what we're looking at are anchor tags. Anchor tags, so anytime you create a link, you have a hover, it will go ahead and put a line under there by default. And we want to stop that text decoration and change that to none. We don't want it. So let's go ahead and we're going to do the anchor tags. And what do we want to put in here? So again, if we're not knowing the property, great time to Google search, and you can just tell it what you are wanting. And another resource, I know we talked about W3 schools, but we also have MDN docs as well that are really good. And it says here the text decoration, by default, we have an underline. And guess what? You can change it to anything that you want, up to including none for it. So that's what we're going to. So let's come back over to our code here and our anchor tag. Let's go ahead and change that to the text decoration, and let's change that to none. Again, don't forget the semicolon. And then the next thing that we can do on here is we're going to need the hover effect of this. And this goes into pseudo classes. And so we can say, hey, any anchor tag, when we hover over you, we want to have your text decoration, and we want to set that to underline. Now, we're not going to be able to test this out. I guess we could go and create a link real quick, and maybe I'll do that just to demonstrate that to you. Let me go grab one real quick. I went ahead and got one here for the W3 schools, just so I can put it on here and show you that our CSS is currently working. If I hover my mouse over this, now we do in fact get the underline effect. Again, I can comment out this code here and notice that the underline is there, and I can go ahead and comment back in that underline is away, and it only shows up when it hovers. Again, feel free to test things out as you're going through. Again, we can hit the unit test to test that this does work, but I just wanted to visually show you that we're on the right track with our CSS work so far. All right, let's move on to our next user story. All right, user story number 5 here. It says that you're going to be creating a div with a class attribute of business card. This is going to contain all of the other elements. So that's one of the key things that we need to pick up on user story number 5. From here on out, every single thing that we make is going to be based upon being inside of this element. So let's go ahead and do that here. A div with a class, we're going to set that equal to the business card, and it does need to have a hyphen in there. And then we're just going to close this up here. And again, everything is going to be inside of this div here. And what I mean by that is I'm going to just add a few more things, and I'll put a comment in here. I'm just going to make it known to myself, everything goes in here. So just a little note for me to know where I need to put things, and we can remove it later, but it's not going to get rendered, and it's just for my personal notes here. So user story number 6, it tells us a lot of things in here that we need to do for the business card selector. So let me first go and add this to our CSS page, and it's going to be a period key and the business card, and the curly brackets go on there. Now, one of the things that I always tell my students is if we see this little period that we have right here, how do you know the difference between, are we attacking a class or an ID? And how do you know which to put in the CSS? And I always give that reference of, in middle school, high school, we have classes, obviously, and each one of those classes is called a period. And so that is a great way for us to remember, hey, do we put a hashtag in here or period? And classes get periods, IDs get hashtag, like driver's license numbers. I think of the hashtag or the pound sign to signify a number. We are targeting the business card, and one of the first properties that we come to here is the element needs to be 300 pixels wide. And so I'm going to go ahead and apply this right here. We'll do the width. We're going to set that to 300 pixels, and we're going to move on to this next statement. The background color is going to be a color of your choice. I went ahead and took a look at what did they use for the background color, and they used this hex code here. So I'm going to supply it for this property here. So the background color, we're going to make it a hashtag FFF0F5. And then I'm going to go ahead and put that semicolon in there, and that way we can move on to the next part here. It says that the padding needs to be 20 pixels all around. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to do padding. I'm going to set that to 20 pixels. And notice that I'm not putting anything else in here as far as the padding goes, because if I just give one unit on here, it's being applied to the top, the right, the bottom, and the left, all with just utilizing one unit right here. Next, it says that the margin top should be 100 pixels. Let's go ahead and do that. We'll do margin top. We're going to set that to 100 pixels. Next, it says on here that the font size needs to be 16 pixels, and then the margin left needs to be auto, and then the margin is also auto. Now, this is how we centered the div on this page here, is the margin left and the margin right. And why didn't I combine this all with the margin? Again, we weren't given any kind of specifics for what they wanted for the margin bottom for this, which is why I didn't combine this all into one type of setting, just like what we have here for the padding. We were able to combine all top, right, bottom, left, all within one setting here. But here we're utilizing 3 lines of code in order to make this work. All right, I was reading this just to make sure that I did cover my bases, and I did fail to mention that in this section here, it did say that the text should be aligned to the center. So that's one of the things that I did not mention in here. Again, the order doesn't matter. I can come in here and do text align, and then we're going to make that center. And that should fix what we would have seen later from a unit test. Now we can move on. User story number 7 in designing a business card for freeCodeCamp. It tells us that the business card element, there needs to be an image element inside there with the class attribute and value of being profile image. You can go ahead and set the image source to what they give you right here. And it should also have an alt tag with a meaningful description. So we'll make sure that we do that as well. So inside here, again, I put my comment in here just to make sure that all of my code, I don't accidentally put it outside of the div. I've done that before. But it wants us to do an image element. It wants the class to be set to profile image, and that does need to have a hyphen in there. Next, it wants us to put in the image source. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the enter key and put the source in here. I want to set that equal to, for right now, I'm going to set that as nothing because I do want to continue on with this, and I don't want the screen to keep wrapping and you guys get lost, but I'm just going to do a little skeleton here. The alt, I'm going to set that equal. It says a meaningful description. Again, you can put anything I want. Anything that you want, I'm going to go ahead and put in here like this video to remind you to this video. For the last part here, it's just closing it off. Now, one of the things to remember when you're going through freeCodeCamp or when you're learning how to develop, there's going to be some tags that are going to be open and close. There's going to be some tags that are self-closing. They're called void elements, so they don't get a closing tag. So this works for the image tag. Let's go ahead and add this image. So that way, I believe in the next user story, we're actually going to define it, right? We're going to give it boundaries because right now it has some boundary issues. User story number 8 seems to be a simple one. It says that we need to come over to our CSS page. Let's go ahead and target the only image that we have on here, and we want to set that width or the max width for the profile image to be 100%. And that's going to help us contain the image. And I don't know why, and maybe somebody else can help me in the comments, and I'm not going to chat GPT it. Why isn't this the default of an image? You put an image in there and let it be only the size of the parent. So we're going to do profile image, and then we're going to set this to our max width, and we want to set that to 100%. Don't forget the semicolon. And now we no longer have boundary issues, and this should work out well for us. So that is user story number 8. User story number 9 in designing a business card for freeCodeCamp. It tells us that inside our business card element that we're all going to be putting all of our elements in so far, it wants us to do the following. It wants us to have 3 paragraph elements and give each one of the class elements the value of full name, designation, and then company. This one's really easy once we figured out what it wants. We're going to come down here and I'm going to go ahead and type in 3 paragraph elements. And so we're going to do a P tag with an open and close. And I am going to put the word class in here, and then I'm going to copy this 3 times. I'm going to do class equals and then the quotes there. And from this point on, I'm going to paste it 3 times. The first one, I need it to be full name. So let me go ahead and add that. The next element that I need is going to be designation. And then the last one that I need is going to be company. Once I have all of those, it is good to go for this one. So user story number 10, 11, and 12, they all revolve around one thing, which is like filling out each one of these parts and pieces. So really for the unit test, you can put anything in here. I'm going to go ahead and put Rob in for the first one. The designation, I'm going to put in here coding instructor. And then the company, I'm going to just do the @ and then it's going to be pre-code camp, which is, you should be subscribed to our YouTube channel right now. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. User story number 13 is a real easy one. It says below our very last paragraph tag element, it needs us to put in an HR element. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll do an HR, and that will give us a horizontal rule. You can see that it applied it right there. So that is going to be user story number 13. User story number 14, it's a long one, and we're going to just go through it instruction by instruction for the user story. So it says after the HR element, there should be 2 paragraph elements. Let's go ahead and do that. So again, 2 paragraph elements. It doesn't give us any kind of class or ID or anything like that, but it just wants 2 paragraph elements on here. So I'm going to go ahead and do an opening and closing tag of 1. I'm going to copy and paste. That way I can speed this up. So now that I have 2 on there, it says the first element should have an email address and the second one should have the phone number. So I'm going to go ahead and create one here. We'll do info@freeCodeCamp. And then the next one here is the phone number. And so we'll just do 55 and then we'll finish this off here. So those are the 2 paragraph ones. And then it says there should be an anchor tag with the text portfolio. Now, when freeCodeCamp gives us something in the gray here, it's exactly looking for it. So again, let's go ahead and do the following. We'll do an anchor tag, and I'm going to go ahead and close it off. That's just good practice to make sure that we have opening and closing things on here. And I'm going to go to the next line, and actually it needs to be portfolio is what needs to be in there. And then we're not seeing the underline effect or the color blue actually because we have CSS that is not allowing the underline to happen. And we want the href here. It says it needs to go to a valid URL, and I'll just put in the pre-CodeCamps one. So HTTPS and then www.freecodecamp.com, and that is going to be the portfolio. So notice that I hover over this, the underline now appears, and that's all because of our CSS work that we did up above. Next on here, it says add an HR element after your anchor tag containing your portfolio link. And so that goes after the closing tag on this. And I can't stress it enough on how important it is whenever you create a tag, you put a closing tag on it, at least for the freeCodeCamp portion that we're doing this in the browser, because usually your code editors that you're using will automatically put those closing tags there for you. So I'm going to do another HR here. And again, no closing tags for it. It is a void element. And you can see our extra line is now added at the bottom of our portfolio. And that is user story number 14 with all of its items that it was wanting us to do. So it looked big. We were able to break it down into smaller pieces to make sure that it is looking good for us. On to the last few user stories. So user story number 15, it says we want to add another div element on there. The class attribute needs to be set to social media. And then we need to have an H2 that says the following, which is connect with me. Simple enough. Let's go ahead and break it down one step at a time with this. So after the HR, let's go ahead and do a div. And I'm going to go ahead and do the opening and closing tags right off the bat so I don't forget. And then I'm going to go ahead and give myself a little bit of room, and I do need to put a class on here. So I'm inside that very first div tag. I'm going to add a class on here, and it's going to be called social media. Now it says inside here we want to have an H2 element, and we want to set that to connect with me. So no IDs, no classes on this part here. It's just an H2 open and close. And what goes in between here is exactly what they give you right here. So this has to be exact. So that way when we click the test, we want to get credit for this. And that looks good to me with the connect with me. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. We're on our last user story here, which is number 16. It says inside the social media element, let's go ahead and add 3 anchor elements. The elements should have the text Twitter, LinkedIn, and GitHub, respectively, with links and valid websites. So again, we're going to fake the funk on a couple of these. So all we need to do, again, I'm just doing an anchor tag and I'm going to close them off. And let's go ahead and add what we need on here. So we'll do, and I'm going to go ahead and set that equal to, again, we can set it equal to anything. This one will be the Twitter. I'm surprised that they're still calling it Twitter on here. We can put Twitter because I think it's looking for that. So let's do that first. Twitter, and let me copy each one of these and we'll go ahead and paste them down here. And let me fix the indentation for the video. All right, next is going to be the LinkedIn. And then the last one here is GitHub. For the URLs, again, we can do anything on here. And this one is going to be LinkedIn. And then the last one here of GitHub. All right. And let's go ahead and test everything out. I think we got everything and we may have to tweak some things, but we'll see. So here comes the test. Let's go ahead and run through these. We didn't get the congratulations, so there's something that's wrong on here. We're going to look for the X and see what we missed. I only see one X. That's good, especially for all the work that we did. It says it couldn't find the portfolio part. It's here, and I am going to remove the spacing in here, and I'm hoping that is what it's looking for, because when I hit the enter key, it's counting those spaces and it's not needed. But visually, it did not change anything on the web page. So I'm going to go ahead and rerun these tests, and hopefully that fixed it. Congratulations, we completed it. So all in all, it wasn't that bad. Hopefully if you stuck out through this video that you ended up completing it as well, and you learned a few things from the video. So with that said, I'm Rob with freeCodeCamp. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Don't forget to subscribe. Bye.